Hi everyone, Evette Rose here from Reset Your Life Summit. And guys, here today I have Dr. Joe Vitale. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Of course, I've been looking forward to this moment.
Me too. I'm so excited. And so, guys, here, Dr. Joe, he's an author and he's also one of the best-selling authors in the world. And he's also appeared in many, many TV shows and TV films. He's also been, for example, on Donnie Duchess, The Big Idea, Larry King Live, ABC, Fox News. And he's also the star in the movie The Secret. And believe it or not, he has so many talents. He's a jack of all trades. He's even a musician. He has over 4 albums to his name. And his songs have actually also been nominated for the Posey Award, which is also known as the Grammys of Positive Music. So, wow, you have accomplished so much in your life. It's like, I feel like you've compressed 10 lifetimes into one. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I feel that way sometimes too. I keep reincarnating myself and recreating myself. But the truth is, all I'm doing is following my passion. Whatever I get excited about, I pursue it. Even when there's no promise of reward, nobody's hiring me, nobody's paying me, nobody's applauding me, nobody's encouraging me. I do it because my heart says, follow that path. You keep following it, and before you know it, you write all these books, you have all these music albums, you have all these movies. It just adds up.
That's amazing. Now, you've accomplished so much, right? You're living an amazing life, a really heart-filled, fulfilled life. But I also know I've listened to a lot of your talks and a lot of your interviews. I also know it hasn't always been this way for you. And you've had your challenges, and also, we've all had our challenges here going through COVID, and we're all trying to find our way out of these challenges as well. But I would love to hear just a little bit about your story and what you have been through as well in your life leading up to all this amazing success that you've created.
It's not been an overnight success. It's not been an easy road. There have been plenty of dark nights of the soul, not dark night, dark nights of the soul. I would say I wanted to be an author when I was a kid, but it took me decades before I was ever published. And during that time, I went into homelessness for a while. I was in poverty for 10 years. And during all of that time, I was working, I was persistent, I was creating, I was trying, and not really getting anywhere. My first book was 1984, and then I didn't have another book until 1995.
Oh,
And
wow.
even then, it was a very slow growth period. But you keep plugging at things, you keep being persistent, and over time, you can get out of it. And then, as you know, most recently, I've gone through some of the worst struggles of my entire life. The shared struggle with everybody is COVID and the pandemic. But also, I went through a divorce that I thought would be easy because I was willing to give away everything and just walk away and try to find a loving win-win. But instead, it ended up being a persecution, a 3-year persecution of my life and business. And it was excruciating. It was agonizing. You're talking about barely getting out of bed because it was such a hard thing to carry. And during the same period, my father died, my best friend died, a family member attempted suicide. I went into a new relationship during this time, and she developed neuro-Lyme disease, and I ended up being her caretaker, living in her apartment, trying to help her survive while I'm trying to handle grief, confusion, divorce attorneys, expenses, emotional drain, all of this. And to add to all of that, COVID hits, there's a pandemic, and my greatest livelihood, which is traveling around the world, getting on stages and speaking, is wiped out.
Yeah.
So I too know what it's like to struggle, whether it was a long time ago with homelessness or most recently with a divorce that only ended a little while ago.
That's a lot. I'm still digesting everything that you said. That's a lot for a human being. I mean, no one, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how well of a speaker we are or what we've mastered in our lives. No one is above pain or loss or separation or distress. No one is above that. And of course, this is something that you 100% would have been feeling as well. And something that I've noticed in my life is that, and I find this with me, when I get upset, when I feel angry, when I feel sad, when I feel depressed, it's very easy to, get stuck in that pit. I almost call it like a bottomless pit, because that's what it feels like. It feels like it has no end. And the more we kind of like get stuck in that cycle, the more we feel, but I'm depressed. And we become, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it feels like we can't break that cycle. We can't break through this invisible wall that we can feel is there, but we can't see it. We don't know where to even penetrate through that. And I'm sure that this is also a cycle that you probably experienced yourself.
In fact, it was worse for me because I was going through this while my reputation in the world is as a spiritual teacher, self-help teacher, somebody who's transcended all of these everyday problems. And here I am going through it. And so a part of me really beat myself up, thinking, how could you attract this? How can you be in this mess? How can you not get out of it more easily? Because I know all these different techniques. So in many ways, I made the darkness even worse with my critical self-judgment about what I was going through. Now, at the same time I say that, I know enough tools, I've written about them, I've taught them, I've been on stages revealing them to everybody, that I was able to lift myself up. But I had to lift myself up every single day during this period. And there were also times that I felt like I couldn't do it by myself. And I reached out for help. I am not afraid to say, look, I'm drowning over here. I need somebody to throw me a life preserver. And I called on people. I called on you. You and I did some work together because I was looking for somebody to pull me out of the darkness when I couldn't lift myself out.
Yeah. And I have to just take my hat off to you for allowing yourself to just be so vulnerable and to still stand strong in your self-worth, because that is self-love. That is self-love. Because I went through something so similar to you with my divorce prior as well, and being a teacher and all the students looking up to you and thinking, oh my goodness, my two role models is they can't get their lives together, and it's like, oh my goodness, what is this? And so many things collapsing around me at the same time, and feeling exactly like that as well. And asking for help was the hardest thing that I had to do. I had to be on a mattress in a guest house in a Balinese family on the floor, and I had to be on my knees crying. I haven't eaten for 3 days because I was just in such a state of distress, and I just had this ego death, and I realized I'm not okay. I can't do this on my own. And I think it's beautiful that we can have a community, that we can have support. And yes, I reached out for help. I absolutely did. And I felt good when I did that. And that's when my life took a turnaround 360 degrees. So
I think you're highlighting very important insights that everybody needs to get. And I think one of them is when people are suffering, they tend to think they're all by themselves and they're the only one suffering. Well, I wrote a song many years ago called Everybody's Going Through Something. And the truth of the matter is everybody's going through something. There may be various degrees, there may be different stories around it, but it's still pain, it's still suffering. It is still something that people feel like they're going through it alone. So I think one of the first things is to realize you're not alone. You are not alone. I went through a divorce and I thought, well, I'm the only one in history that went through it. No, obviously there've been horrible divorces, horrendous divorces, and mine wasn't anything like that. Mine was unique, mine hurt, and mine was mine. But knowing other people went through that alleviated it just a little bit for me. And then I think the other thing you're pointing out, and I had said I did too, I asked for help. I was brought up thinking that I had to do it myself. And I think that was actually one of my problems when I was homeless and in poverty. I was the Lone Ranger. I was thinking, I'll solve this because I'm a man, I'm macho, I've been taught to be strong, and so I'll find a way to solve it. And as long as I tried to do it by myself, I could not get out of it. I needed to raise my hand and say, somebody help me out. So I think that's another lesson for everybody is don't be afraid to ask for help. What you're going through is real. You're not alone. And there are people who have been through it that can show you some doorways and windows and secret passages to kind of slip through it a little easier.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of point on this because this is also something that I learned from my experience and maybe something that people can relate to as well. One of the reasons why I didn't say that I was, not okay, why I didn't ask for support as well, why I didn't ask for help. It wasn't just the ego aspect that I was experiencing. It was also, I had a lot of trauma associated with support. So now I'm trying to avoid the very thing that I needed the most because of all past wounds and ghosts that was attached to this beautiful concept of support. I always thought of support being, now I'm trapped. Now I have to, sometimes we have to actually support, but it's not the kind of support that we need. So we actually still feel unsupported, but now we feel unworthy of correcting the kind of support that we need by saying this, thank you for what you're doing, but this is actually what I need, which is diving even deeper more into what we feel we are worthy of and being able to verbalize that. And so my experience with support was just horrific. I always felt now I owe someone something. Now I am in debt to someone. And that's when I realized when I was here in Bali 10 years ago, when all of this is happening. It's funny, I'm actually back here. I'm coming full circle, but this time in a good way. I realized that just communicate the kind of support that you need. Cut out the gray area and just say, also, I'm not okay. This is what I need.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great insight because there is a self-value there. Sometimes when people think that they need support and they ask for support, they think that they are weak. They think that they're not enough. They think that they're lacking in some way. And I got to point out that because we're going through this, and this is the human experience, asking for help is a very natural thing to do. We are a community of 7 billion people. We actually are in relationship with the planet itself. We are not here to be all alone. And so when we do feel like we're cut off and we feel like we're not strong enough, or we feel like we're really weak, or we're really hurting, we're feeling like a victim, that's exactly the time that we need to say, I need somebody's help. If you know who it is or what kind of help, even better. I know early on when I was so confused and so blasted by what was happening in the early stages of the divorce, I told my attorneys, I said, this is your life. You guys see divorced people and the fighting and everything that happens every single day. This is my life, though. This is not my vocation. This is actually my life that I'm going through. And I remember asking one attorney, I said, what is the best advice you ever heard on getting through something like this divorce or any divorce? Yeah. And he paused for a little bit and he said, focus on the future. Focus on the future. Instead of dwelling on the past, instead of dwelling on the muck, instead of dwelling on the emotions that are everything from what did I do, how did this happen, the self-punishment, the self-loathing, the weakness, the confusion, the emotion, all of that. Instead of being there, which will keep you there from the law of attraction or any way that you want to look at it, the more you focus on those kind of dark elements, you stay in the dark. But if you just pause and you take a breath and you go, where do I want to go? What do I want to create? How do I want the next, at least next few weeks or few months or next few years, how would I like them to turn out? That opened the window for me. And then the next thing I had to do is, as I pointed out earlier, was ask for help. I've been fortunate enough that a woman who has helped me started helping me in 1985. 1985. I am broken, unknown, and struggling in 1985. And yet we rendezvoused. The universe blessed us together. And she has been in and out of my life as needed, whenever I needed her. And she was there through the divorce. And I would call her and she would help me kind of unravel my own thinking. Because when we get in these dark places, part of the reason it's dark is our thoughts created it that way. We make it worse. Seneca, one of the early Stoics, said we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. And
Yes.
I was going through that because, you know, your head spins all of these scenarios that may or may not have to do with actual reality. So there's a whole lot that we're covering here, and I hope people are really paying attention to some of the key elements that we're both sharing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so true what you said, because even when we are in our imagination and we can sense it, we can feel that, there is an emotional reaction happening in the body. There's a biochemical response happening based on an imaginative thought. And it doesn't even exist yet, but now our body's feeling the distress of that. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in one way or another. And I'm sure that's probably what you're saying. Also, that's how we align with this negativity and become a match to that.
Yeah, we go into the what if down scenario. A friend of mine, Mindy Odland, had written a book called What If It All Goes Right? And she teaches this what if up method. And the what if up method, which is a good thing for everybody to hear about right now, is learning to ask better questions. What most of us do is ask what if in a negative way. What if the divorce bankrupts me? What if my emotional scarring is so bad I can never speak on stage, I can never teach again, I'm crippled in terms of my spirituality? And I go down the road of what if bad scenarios. What if up is asking different questions. What if the divorce ends up being a turning point in my life? What if I learned something so profound from this challenge and this trauma and drama that I may never have heard of or learned from anything else? What if I develop a strength out of this theater of the courtroom and everything, which is theater in one way, but it's very real in another way? But what if I develop a strength out of it? Maybe I'll write a book out of it that'll transform lives. Even right now, as I do the what if up in terms of asking different questions, my energy goes up. I feel better. When I was talking about the divorce and the what if down, I started to feel a little bit dark, only because I started to go in that direction. So knowing we have a choice, when we start listening to our brain, and it says, what if this ruins you? What if this damages your health or something? We're doing the what if down, and we're just playing with our imagination. We're not even saying it's real. We're saying, what if it goes wrong? And instead of saying that, the better approach would be, what if it goes right? What if it goes better? What if this is a turning point for the most glorious, heavenly, enlightening experience of your life? Just asking a better question. Your body is different. Your energy is different. Your biology has changed. Your mindset has changed. And then from the esoteric standpoint, you're sending out an energy that will magnify and come back to you to match the higher vibe you're now feeling.
I love that. I love that. You know, it's almost like what you're saying also, it's feel the feeling that you want to feel. So focus more so on what it is that you want. And then what step can you take right now? Even if it's a small step, but what step can you take now actively towards that to bring yourself closer to that and aligning with that and energizing?
That's brilliant right there. It's one of the things that I've learned to, I've taught it, I've written about it, but I had to learn to really embody it, to really step into it. So many of us are sitting here thinking, I'll be happy, I'll feel better when such and such happens, when the event is over, the divorce is over, when I get the job, when I get the raise, when COVID's gone, whatever. And we'll start saying, oh, we'll feel better then. But here's the trick. You can feel better right now. And if you feel better right now, you can actually speed up the manifestations of the very things you've been longing for. I remember reading a book, this was a book from the 1930s called Fortunes for All. And he said, take out a piece of paper. And he says, on that paper, write down everything you want. Everything. And he says, write down the secret desires, the public desires, all of your wishes, your goals, your wants. And you're not going to show it to anybody. You're just being honest with yourself. What do you want? You write them all down, everything. And then he says, did you leave anything out? If you left something out, go back and add it to your list. Make your list complete. And then when you're done, start looking at it and imagining that it already happened. You already got the house or the spouse or whatever was your longing. And how does it feel to have those things? Because I know when I did that exercise and I started to imagine all these things that have been goals and some still are goals for me, and I'm imagining they're complete. And I'm going, oh my God, this is heaven. This feels fantastic. And then he said, you want all those things for that feeling. And you have that feeling right now. Oh, I got chills thinking about this. You can have all those things that you want, the feelings, the great ecstasy that you think is going to come from something else. You can have it right now by pretending in some ways that you already have it. And then from esoteric laws, you actually start to send out signals to the what I call the esoteric internet. And the esoteric internet, which is the wireless system that connects all of us, starts moving people around like puppets to help create the very thing you said you wanted. But it all comes from your feeling. This is really cool stuff.
I absolutely love that. That's very, very insightful. And I fully agree with that. Now, I know that you've been talking so much. When I hear you speak, you talk a lot about Hooponopono, and the name is actually quite longer. How do you even pronounce that correctly? Because I find most people don't even know how to pronounce it, including me.
No, you did well. I've heard all kind of versions of it, but it's Hooponopono. Hooponopono. And it's a long word, but it's a Hawaiian spiritual method. And for the longest time, it was basically secret. But I had heard a story way back in 2004 of a therapist who helped heal an entire ward of mentally ill criminals. And he helped heal them in the most odd way. When I heard the story, I didn't even believe it, because he said, or the people telling me the story said, the therapist never worked with the mentally ill criminals. He worked on himself. And as he worked on himself, they got better. And I thought, oh, come on now. I believe in magic and miracles, but that sounds like an urban legend. How did he work on himself? And people in a mental institution that are violent criminals, how did they get better? And I ended up doing the research, finding the therapist, and writing the first book with him that revealed Hooponopono to the world. And this ended up being a turning point for me. And I've since written 3 books on this. The very first one was called Zero Limits. And that's the one that's still traveling around the world. And it's miraculous what it's helping people to realize. So Hooponopono is a tool that you use inside yourself to correct what you're seeing on the outside. So to give you a quick example, if somebody has an interpersonal relationship problem, it could be with their daughter, it could be with their neighbor, it could be with their employer, their employee, it doesn't matter. Whatever they're perceiving as a problem is felt inside themselves. Yeah. This alone is an insight, because most of us just point out there and say, it's that person is causing me the problem. But we pause in Hooponopono and go, where do you feel it? Well, you feel it inside. And so what we want to do is work with the feeling, because the feeling is based on a perception. And as we're feeling the perception that they're bad, or with the therapist, he's looking at mentally ill criminals and he's thinking, boy, this is a mess. And he's enraged, or he's embarrassed, or he's grieving. As he's feeling whatever those feelings are, as the person that is imagining going through this right now is feeling it, you're located inside yourself. Now, you pretend you're having a dialogue with your creator. And that could be nature, that could be the divine, that could be God, that could be the cosmos, that could be the universe, that can be source. We all have a different name for something that we would agree is a higher power. And we have a communication, which is kind of a prayer, it's kind of a petition. And we say 4 simple phrases. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. So you're feeling whatever you're sensing. You're saying, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, to the great something, to your connection, and you're letting go. What you're asking is for the great something to remedy your perception of the problem. Because when your perception is erased or deleted or gone, the outer changes. And the most dramatic example is the one I first heard. The therapist did work at the state hospital in Hawaii. He did look at the records of these mentally ill criminals who had to be shackled or sedated because they were so violent and unpredictable. And he did use Hooponopono on himself. As he achieved an inner level of peace, they, on the outside, started to reflect it and got better. Within months, they were being pronounced as, well, they don't need sedation, they don't need shackle. Months after that, they started to be pronounced as healthy and being released. This is the power, because when I heard the story, I thought, if this works for mentally ill criminals, it will be magic and miracles for you and I, who don't work with mentally ill criminals. We're working with everyday problems and challenges, all of which are perceived inside.
This is powerful. And you know what I'm almost hearing right now as well is when we look at someone, it's almost like our judgment of them locks them into the perceived limitation that we experience, and we almost hold them in that space. But if we eradicate that and we bring them up to their highest potential by seeing the best in them, it opens up this beautiful portal or option for them throughout the quantum field to tap into these new states of resources.
And that's absolutely correct. What most of us are doing are living a very unconscious life. And it's true for all of us. We're walking around kind of like robots. We've already been programmed that at a certain point, I mean, you, your audience and everything is going to be more awake and more aware and more enlightened. But we've all been programmed. We were programmed when we were born. We were programmed by the culture we were in, by the parents, by the religion, by the educational system, by the media. And we get to a certain point when we're an adult and we look at somebody we never met before, but we shake hands and go, I don't like that person. Why not? Part of it is they're matching some sort of pre-program that's in your unconscious. And we lock them in. They don't even have anything to do with it. They just kind of show up. And because they match a filter that's already inside of you, you pass judgment. Yeah. But with Hooponopono, you can correct that.
Yeah. So I have to ask, how did you discover this? How did this come onto your path? This is clearly something that deeply affected you in such a beautiful, positive way. So how did this show up in your life?
That is a great question. You know, the very first answer is I am profoundly curious. And so even as a kid, 13, 14, 15 years old, I'm reading esoteric books. I'm a big fan of the library. Today, I create my own libraries, but growing up, and when I didn't have money for books, go to the public library. And I was blessed to be born and raised in a small town that had a big library. And I'd go and read the self-help books and the parapsychology and the pop psychology and the philosophy and try to understand it as best I could as a young child. But that openness has allowed me to stumble across different things throughout my life. And there's all kinds of tools that I've learned to use and I've written about in different places. Hooponopono was one of them. I'm sure other people around the 2000, 2001, 2002 had heard the story. They heard the story about this therapist who helped heal an entire ward of mentally ill criminals with some crazy Hawaiian method, but they dismissed it. They didn't investigate. They weren't open to it. I'm not bragging in any way. I just thought, I'm there. I'm hearing it. It seems like it's an opportunity. And I said, if it's true, somebody needs to tell the world. And so after I heard the story, I went online. And at that point, there was next to nothing about Hooponopono online, and I could not find a therapist. But I also knew a private investigator. And I told him, I said, can you find this guy?
Wow.
And he did. He did.
Wow.
Well, this is also me. I'm following my passion. As I mentioned earlier, that's really all I'm ever doing. I heard this story. I'm starting to get curious about it. Now I'm very passionately pursuing it. And then I find out that the therapist's name is Dr. E. Haleakula Hu Lin. And I get a phone number. I call him up. I call him up because I am just freaking curious. I want to know, is the story true? And what did he do? And he spent an hour on the phone with me. He didn't know me. There was no connection. There was no payment. He was just very generous with his time. And then he said he was doing an event in Calabasas, California. I was living in Texas, and I said, I'm coming. And I went to the event and stayed there. And at that point, because Hooponopono was under the radar, there were like 15 people there. It wasn't a crowd. It wasn't a big event, but I got to meet the therapist. I investigated everything with him. We really hit it off together. And I said, look, I'll volunteer. I'll write the book. I think the story needs to be told. And at that point, he says, I already have somebody who's going to write the book, but thank you. And as it turned out, that person fell through, did not write the book. And Dr. Hulen went to me and said, the divine says you're supposed to do it. And he and I came out with Zero Limits, I think in 2005. So how do I stumble across? It's the same thing with that or anything else that's been a turning point in my life. I think it's the openness to receive a new idea. And then it's my curiosity and then my passion and persistence to pursue it, to find out, let's see where it goes.
I love that. The curiosity is so beautiful, and it's something that's still so like alive in you. Like you called Mr. Fire, and like it's so accurate, so accurate, because we don't stay connected to that sense of curiosity. It's almost like in a way, a childlike, like an innocent type of curiosity, because that's how we learn. That's how we have breakthroughs. That's how scientists have breakthroughs. These people remain curious. They remain in that state of there has to be something better out there, or there can be perhaps a better solution, but they stay curious about it. They don't see their limitations or challenges that they're experiencing as a problem. They see it as an opportunity. And this is what I love about this mindset, because it's so incredibly powerful. And that's how children learn so fast, because they remain curious. They absorb everything around them.
I totally agree. And I think that's one of the things that's still available to all of us. Yeah. I actually think that the pandemic was and has been a gift. Early on, when people started talking about, oh, it's a conspiracy and so was behind it. And I thought, oh, give me a break. That's going down the dark side and the dark road. But then I thought, well, let me ride this a little bit. And I got curious and I started making videos. I post videos on Instagram almost every day. And early on, I said, yeah, there's a conspiracy. It's a divine conspiracy. Right. The divine gave us this and has sent us to our room. And in fact, I said, when the authorities tell you go inside, what that metaphysically means is go inside yourself. Yes. That the divine conspiracy is forcing you to go inside yourself, to meditate, contemplate, reconnect, create, to do all the things that many of us have said, oh, if I only had the time to fill in the blank. Well, we were just given the time to do it. And there was a pandemic 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have Facebook. They didn't have Zoom. They didn't have YouTube. They didn't have Google. We have all of that. Not only have we been able to stay in contact with loved ones, but whatever you want to learn, and I don't care what it is, somebody posted free lessons online. I know when I first bought a saxophone, I said, I'm going to learn the saxophone. I didn't know what to do. I had the instrument and I'm looking like, how do I put this together? I go online and there's somebody saying, here's the reed and here's the mouthpiece and here's how you put it on. Right. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to learn, it's there. And I think the divine, whatever you want to call the divine, is the higher power kind of forcing us to look at things we didn't want to look at.
That's very true. And what it also did was, especially for me and what I've seen with so many other people as well, like it almost like pushed us and nudged us quite hard to meet ourselves, to befriend ourselves, because we are biologically designed to feel emotions, but we've literally constructed our entire life to avoid them through coping mechanisms, through self-sabotage, which creates more problems, and we need to create more coping mechanisms around those pain points. So it's almost like this, we become the hamster in the wheel. And this also kind of broke that cycle a bit to kind of shake us out of that wheel and say, hey, if you go left, there's actually a path that goes straight, instead of, just running in this wheel and having all these self-fulfilling prophecies at the end of the day. And I really noticed that with myself, because going within was hard, because I thought I've been within me, but this is a whole different way of going within. This was
Yeah.
really going in within. And Rumi once said, the best healing is when you go into the place where the pain is. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's meeting the wound where the pain is. And
Yes.
it's hard when your entire life has been built with all these walls to avoid that. And then to break through those walls and those barriers and the numbness and the disassociation, the denial, the lies that we told ourselves, because sometimes we think our life is a certain way because of we built our life with these coping mechanisms, but when these mechanisms collapses and we see the truth, that's a hard reality check sometimes to digest. And I kind of went through a little bit that myself last year, but I have to say, and I was glad it happened because now I feel like I'm aligning and I'm living more in my truth rather than what I thought the truth was as well.
Mm. Mm. And I think this is what we've been all asked to do.
Yeah.
I'm a great believer in following the nudges from spirit.
Yeah.
And early on, I would say when somebody asked me what kind of a business I have, and I would say, you know, I'm a soul entrepreneur. But what I meant was I'm an SOUL entrepreneur. It didn't mean that I was soul like solitary entrepreneur. I'm a soul entrepreneur, meaning that what's coming out of me is directing me. I have written books. The story that I've been telling a lot is back in 1992. I'm unknown. I had a book published in 84, but still by 92, I'm not known at all. And there's no internet yet at that point. I'm reading a book. And I was reading a book called the Robert Collier Letter Book. It won't mean anything to most of your viewers. And I'm reading it, and there was a mention in there of a guy by the name of Bruce Barton. And it said he had been a best-selling author. He was a congressman. And something in me said, find that man. Now, there was nobody talking to me, and there was nothing in the book that said, hey, we need to go on Earth and go and research Bruce Barton, but something in me. And this is what I mean, that something is in all of us. It's nudging us to do certain things and go in certain directions. It can guide us divinely. And so I began an almost obsessed mission to find out who Bruce Barton was. And I didn't have money. I didn't have connections. I still wasn't even buying books. I was going to the library. I had to use interlibrary loan to find books about Bruce Barton. Long story short, I ended up writing a book called The 7 Lost Secrets of Success. And it was published in 1992. It's all about Bruce Barton. That book, which I didn't know I was going to write, when I started investigating Bruce Barton, I'm just profoundly curious. Who the hell is he or was he? And I ended up writing this book. That book became a turning point in my life. I started getting clients who wanted to hire me to write books or to write marketing pieces. One person in Houston, one person had a company, and he heard me on a radio show, one of the very first I did. And I just kind of stumbled around talking about Bruce Barton, but my passion was there. My childlike passion was there, talking about a guy most people never heard of. And that man bought 19,000 copies of the book. He bought 19,000 copies for everybody in his company. That book went on through numerous editions. And then as my fame grew, because The Secret came out and I had best-selling books, this, that, and the other, a bigger publisher picked up that book, and there was more money involved. In fact, the book's on Amazon now, the most recent version of it. But the point, all of that success was not planned. All of that success was not expected. All of that success came because there was a little tiny seed planted inside me. And I believe that I'm reading this book innocently, just enjoying my reading, and the divine clicks. The divine goes, check that out. This is your new assignment. Check out Bruce Barton. And I think all of us get these kind of assignments, but most of us kind of dismiss them. But for me, this is one of the secrets for all of us. And COVID, in a way, sent us to a room, gave us all a timeout, gave us the opportunity to learn how to meditate, learn how to contemplate, learn how to reconnect. But what are we reconnecting to? I think our opportunity is to reconnect to divinity. And it can guide us, much like it did with me and Bruce Barton and me and Hooponopono, and even me in The Secret. I didn't plan to be in The Secret. I didn't ask to be in The Secret. You
Oh,
know, I got a phone call from a woman in Australia, said, I read one of your books, The Attractor Factor, and I'm thinking about making a movie. And she said, I'd like you to be in it. And I'm like, I've never been in a movie before, but okay. And then I almost didn't even do it because when she called back, I was really busy at the time and I almost didn't go. But that same divine nudge said, no, you should do this one.
yeah.
And of course, I'm glad I did because it changed history for me and it's still changing history for the world because the movie is still having an impact on
Absolutely.
everybody. So,
Yeah.
Evette, all of this is just to say, following that inner guidance. And part of what COVID has done is given us an opportunity to hear it, to feel it, to sense it, and to act on it.
I love this. So when I look at and listen to everything that you've said so far, so it's follow your passion. Imagine what it is that you want to feel and stay in the positive, and then take small steps in your life to start creating things to feel that. And be consistent, because consistency is key. You can't do something once and then, we have to sometimes keep the energy flowing to continue to stay connected to that and for us to create that into a reality. And then also feel what it is that you want to feel that's positive instead of what you not want to feel. Don't energize the negative, energize the opposite.
And there's one thing that I'm going to give as a kicker because it's really important. I was on a radio show and they asked me, they kind of blindsided me because he said out of nowhere, he says, you've written all these books, and I've written like 80 books at this point. And he says, you've read all of these books. And I've lost count of how many books I've read, and stacks here, more coming. And he said, out of all the books you've read, all the books you've written, all the things you've done, all the things you've heard, what's the one thing that always works? What's the one thing that always works? And I felt like, boy, I'm on the hot seat here, but I like the challenge. And I wanted to say something worthwhile. And I reflected and I said, there's so many things I could say.
Yeah.
But then I thought, there is one thing. There is one thing. And it's the one thing I want everybody to keep in mind. And that is persistence. Persistence wins out over luck. It wins out over talent. It wins out over connections. It wins out over pretty much anything that you could imagine. When I was a kid and I said I wanted to write, I was persistent. I started writing. When I was homeless, I'm still wanting to be an author. When I'm in poverty, I am writing. I'm sending out manuscripts. And even by the time 1984 comes around, my first book's published and it kind of disappears the same day it's published, I still keep writing. And then in 1992, I do the 7 Lost Secrets of Success. And then there's a few more books that start coming out. And today, I've written over 80 books. Persistence wins over everything.
I feel so lazy listening to you. This is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
But wait a minute. I'm not going to let you get away with that. Everybody is doing their creating differently.
Of course.
You have come out with masterpieces of books. That's how I first heard about you, was because of your Mammoth encyclopedia. That is like, how in the world did she ever do that? And I'm sitting here marveling. And I remember telling Lisa about that, going, look what she did. And I ordered copies and I gave some to friends and I still have it. I mean, this Mammoth thing. So that's not a lazy person. That's not a lazy person. You create in your way. Other people create in their ways. I create in my way. And this is the thing. When we all follow our passion, when we each follow our purposeful passion, the world works. You don't need to write 80 books. And I don't need to write one Mammoth encyclopedia uncoding all the emotions and metaphysical reasons for things. That's not for me to do.
Yeah. And I love what you said. And I'm glad you actually brought that up, because the biggest mistake we often make is to compare ourselves.
Yes.
It's not our path. It's not your path. Don't compare. Because if it was your path, you've been there and you're not. So focus where you're at. Yeah.
Comparison will destroy you. Comparison can be used to inspire you, but very often comparison is used as a way to put yourself down. If I sat here and said, oh, I've written 80 books, I could easily look around and find, like Bob Bly was a guy who inspired me. He's written over 130 books. And Isaac Asimov inspired him, and he wrote over 450 books. And if I start looking at all these other ones, and I would go, God, I only wrote 80. I'm a failure. I only wrote 80. But instead of looking at it as that comparison, I look at it as more of an inspiration. It's like, oh, he wrote 130. That means I can write some more. You know, I can keep doing it. I don't jog anymore, but decades ago when I was doing it and I was in a couple races, there was a phrase that they used, and I think it's one we all need to use. All they wanted to do was exceed their personal best. So if they ran a certain time for a marathon, the next time they ran, they wanted to exceed their personal best, not anybody else's personal best, not break the record, not break the 4-minute mile from Bannister. They only wanted to break their own personal record. And I think that's the focus. You just focus on yourself. What are you creating? What are you doing? Make your contribution to the world. You don't have to worry about anybody else writing more or anybody else writing less. You just do yours.
I love that. And I love the work that you also do. Thank you for you, your time, your energy, your love, and everything.
What? It's over?
Oh, yeah. Actually very late.
I'm having too much fun.
This was amazing. This was so insightful. And I hope and I trust and I know that people are taking golden nuggets away from this. I call it golden nuggets. You know, it's like, it's very valuable information, and to apply that to their lives, to apply that to your mindset, because at the end of the day, every change in life takes place with a decision. So let's become conscious of the change that is that you want to create, and just remember these just really simple steps. Yeah.
Yes. I've greatly enjoyed this. You're doing such great work in the world that I couldn't wait to be part of it. And I'm so flattered that you involved me and invited me. So thank you, and Godspeed to everybody that's watching. I wish them all well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Joe, and everyone else. Thank you for being here. And until next time, be the light that you are.